precipitate. After about a minute, and we think we have used the centrifuge long enough, we're going to open the lid of the centrifuge, and the test tubes keep spinning for quite a while because the centrifuge has very good ball bearings, and if we get a little impatient, we can stop the spinning, but we have to be very careful so our fingers do not get caught into the test tube holders. But we can very gently try to stop the spinning of the centrifuge. Now we're going to look at our precipitate, and we see that we have the white precipitate on the bottom. Notice that it's at an angle, but that is because of the way the centrifuge spins. And we have a filtrate above. Now, we're trying to determine whether we have completely precipitated all of the silver chloride. And you can see the filtrate above. So we're going to add more drops of the silver nitrate and see whether more precipitation forms. And sure enough, it still does. This may need to be done several times until we can determine that additional drops do not produce a precipitate. So once again, as we did before, we need to mix the new precipitate into the old precipitate. We're going to do so by placing a stopper onto the test tube. We're going to shake, make sure that we release any pressure produced. We're going to mix the two precipitates into one, and we're going to pack them down again. We once again place it into the centrifuge opposite the other test tube that we already have there. Another feature of the centrifuge is a timer, but it also has a section that says hold. And in that section, when I leave the knob there, it will always be on when I have the lid closed, and when I open the lid, it turns off. So sometimes it's much easier to have it in that setting because I can just time it myself, make my decision of how long I need to keep it there. So once again, I've got my precipitate, and I have filtrate on top. The filtrate is the clear solution that's formed on top, and we're going to add additional drops of the silver nitrate to determine whether complete precipitation has occurred. And notice that additional drops are not producing more precipitation. This tells me that we have achieved our goal, which was to completely precipitate all of the silver chloride from the solution. The next technique to demonstrate is to separate the solution or filtrate from the precipitate. This technique is called decanting. And to do so, we're going to get a second test tube that is clean, and we're going to pour the filtrate from the solution that has the precipitate into it. We're going to do so by simply pouring quickly, and we notice that we now have a filtrate in one test tube. The other test tube has the precipitate with a very small amount of filtrate. It really is impossible to completely pour off all of the filtrate without contaminating the filtrate with some of the precipitate. So the idea is to separate as completely as possible, as efficiently as possible, but without contaminating the filtrate with any of the precipitate. The next technique to be shown is the washing of a precipitate. Just like when you wash clothes at home, if you do so in a washing machine, the washing machine has a cycle that's called the agitation cycle. You have to do the same thing when you wash a precipitate. You're going to add to the precipitate, perhaps distilled water, as I'm doing here, perhaps another solution, however is indicated in your procedures. And you're going to add 2 to 3 milliliters usually of the substance that you're going to wash it with. Well, just like at home, you don't hopefully just let your clothes sit without agitating. We cannot let our precipitate sit without agitation. So we're going to stopper our test tube. We're going to shake. Once again, we tilt it once or twice, make sure that there's no pressure buildup. And then we're going to stopper tightly, and we're going to shake well to make sure that we break up the precipitate. If it appears that the precipitate doesn't completely break up, and that happens sometimes, then we